quello sta andando, va tutto? Vai, fantastico. Allora, prima edizione, devo parlare un po' vicino perché il microfono è qua. Prima edizione di Garibaldi fu ferito. Jimmy, this thing has a strange name, then I will explain you later. Okay. And I'm really, really, really super happy and honored to have with us the great Jimmy Nelson that has a beautiful, beautiful show. It's Palazzo Reale here in Milan. And who could be better than Luca De Gennaro
who knows nothing about photography.
Who knows nothing about
photography. Which is good. We decided this is good.
Exactly. Good. So, I leave you, my friends. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Ciao.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Welcome everybody to Ricordi Stampati. We're here in the middle of Milan. Corso Garibaldi number 65. Don't come here because it's sold out. You know, all the seats are taken. Jimmy Nelson has a great exhibition at the Palazzo Reale in the center of Milan called Humanity. These are a couple of his great and very heavy books. This is Before They Pass Away, and the other one is called Homage to Humanity. We'll talk about him in the next hour. So welcome to Italy.
Thank you for having me.
Right. You're from Great Britain, right?
Good question to begin with.
Yeah. Well,
I would like to abandon that past, maybe. I was born in the UK,
right?
56 years ago, last week. I was born on the 11th of November. The first 7 years of my life, I lived in the developing world. My father was a geologist.
Geologist,
yeah.
Okay.
So we lived in Africa, Southeast Asia, Papua New Guinea, South America, Central Asia, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Congo.
So you started exploring the world.
Yeah, in a way, and I always describe it. My early childhood was a little bit like Mowgli from Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Books. Over-romanticized way of describing it, but very free. And in English, you would describe it as feral, wild. With no rules, with no regulations.
So your family had this kind of...
Yeah, my father was, prior to working for an oil company, he'd spent 10 years living in the Antarctic as an explorer, so he was a bit strange as well. And so I went with them, but in a feral way. Then I was born in the UK, left, went back to the UK when I was 7,
right,
to a boarding school. A very specific boarding school with 1,000 boys, all male.
1,000?
1,000, and we were looked after by 400 Catholic Jesuit priests.
Wow. So it was like Harry Potter style.
Well, yeah, but no wizards. And 1% of those Catholic Jesuit priests should not have been Catholic Jesuit priests. I went back to this, I started in this school having had the first 7 years of my life deeply connected with the world and with everybody in it, whatever color, whatever race, whatever language, whatever costume, and being unaware of our differences, believing we were all one. I think that's the best way to describe it. And being accepted by everybody and quite liking myself as a child. By going into this institution, I went on another journey. I was sent on a journey to my own kind, but my own kind destroyed me as a child.
When you were?
7.
7, wow.
So I arrived in this institution full of trust, full of love for the world and myself. And a small percentage of these 400 Catholic Jesuit priests said, you can come and sit here.
Wow.
And then everything went south. And with that being too dark, because this is going to be a positive podcast, that was the end of one Jimmy. And I kind of died as a child, because if you have sexual abuse by a priest, you don't want to live through it. But you can survive by disconnecting your emotions. So I became 2 Jimmys. There was the body and an emotion here, but I didn't feel anything. You travel through childhood. It's a secret because you're told this is our secret.
So you
It goes on for about 2 years, and then they go, if you tell anybody, we will come and get you, or somebody from above will
So
come
you
and get
didn't
you.
tell anyone?
You're not allowed, and you're 7, 8 years old, so you go deep. Then you exist as a human being, but you don't grow emotionally, so you grow out of balance. Then at the age of 16, we were talking about it earlier, 4 magical things happened at the same time. I had very bad cerebral malaria, so malaria of the brain, so I was very ill, high fever. I was given the wrong medicine by these priests. They thought they were witch doctors too.
Because they were in charge of medicine.
Yeah, well, they were in charge of everything.
Of everything.
In charge of me and you name it. High stress because of the secret. And then one night my hair fell out.
In one night?
In one night. I woke up in the morning and I had no hair. It's called alopecia totalis. It's a nervous reaction, or stress. And so it's this sort of explosion of, I hated myself as a child. I hated the way I felt. And then one day you wake up and you look in the mirror and you hate the way you look, because everybody goes, oh, there's something wrong with you. And I go, oh shit, my secret is out. It was my secret what had happened to me. But suddenly there's this where you look like a freak. And I said, well, I feel like a freak. But it was also beautiful, because then you have to stop one kind of life and you have to start a new life if you choose to live. And I decided to run away. I decided that I had to not reinvent, but rediscover myself as a child, as a teenager. And we were talking earlier about children nowadays. I had an avatar as a child, but it was an analog avatar. I love analog, and we'll talk about that later.
Yes.
And his name was Tintin.
Tintin.
I don't know,
your
Italian
analog
Tintin?
Avatar. Yeah, Tintin. The
Dutch
cartoon character.
Tintin.
Yes.
And I knew all his journeys. I lived with Tintin when these priests used to come in at night and do things with me they shouldn't be doing.
So you talked to Tintin.
I was Tintin.
Yes.
And I disassociated with this, and I became Tintin.
Right.
So I thought, where would Tintin go looking like me? And I thought, he would go to Tibet, because all the children in Tibet have no hair.
Right, okay.
So I was 17 and I bought a one-way ticket.
At 17?
At 17.
How could you run away from the school?
I stole my father's credit card.
Right.
I'd been traveling for 17 years.
So there's a 17 guy who goes to the airport?
No, but I've been traveling for 17 years anyway.
Right. Okay.
As for the traveling backwards and forwards on my own from this institution. So I was very capable of traveling.
Yes, good.
I had nothing to lose anymore, because I'd lost all my dignity and my identity. I was also a very creative child, very androgynous child, also a very dyslexic child, so I was always on the edge anyway. And I thought, well, I have nothing to lose. Nobody gives a shit. And the few people who should have looked after me, I'm going to punish. So I stole my father's credit card and I bought a one-way ticket to Beijing. I got on a train to far northwestern China and I started to walk. And I spent 3 years living in Tibet as a teenager.
What were you doing in Tibet as a teenager?
Good question.
Completely alone.
Good question.
Like every day,
I think,
to eat, and,
in a philosophical way, trying to rediscover myself, but through the eyes of the other. You walk into a country, and I think what the immediate alignment, and that was in hindsight, you understand it, is Tibet was in lockdown. Tibet had been in lockdown for 30 years. The Chinese had come in 1952 and said, this belongs to us. The rest of the world had gone, the economic potential of China is far more important than a few people living in mountains with no hair. So Tibet had been abandoned by the developed world. Prior to me arriving there used to be 660 working monasteries. When I arrived, there were 3 left. Wow. So the culture had been bulldozed off the face of the earth. 50% of Tibetans had been excommunicated. So I arrived, I was in lockdown, using a contemporary term, in self. I arrived in a culture that was in lockdown from the rest of the world. And they kind of adopted me. And they said, hey, there's something wrong with you. And I said, yeah, there's something wrong with me. And they said, come, you're hungry. And I said, I'm hungry. You're lost. I'm lost. You need help. I need help. And then as a teenager. And then slowly, they literally take you, and we're going to look after you, and we're going to keep you warm. We're going to hold you in a healthy way.
But when you say they who?
So
Like
Tibet's-
there was a family? or
No,
a community?
different. I'm there 3 years, so nomads and monks, and but
Okay.
I'm speeding up time. But it was this sort of we need to hold you. I want to be held, but in a healthy way.
Yeah, of course.
So there's all these, and it's okay. We're here. We see you, we feel you, we love you as a human being. That's their culture, and then you start to breathe again. And what's extraordinary, and again, this is in hindsight, it's, only in middle-age reflection, you understand what you were doing. You begin to trust other human beings. And the irony is that these human beings were human beings on the other side of the world, living on top of mountains, off the grid, human beings that had no role or authority to look after me. The ones who should have been looking after me destroyed me.
Yeah.
So I'd gone back to my roots. So you asked, where was I from? I think I'm from the world.
Right.
I was little Jimmy, and I traveled around the world, and I was from everywhere, and everybody saw me, and I saw them. I was institutionalized and destroyed in the process. And autodidact, I tried to fix myself. And what I took on the journey, this is where this journey began, is I took an old camera, a Russian, it's called a Zenit B, and 3 rolls of analog film.
That's when you were there?
Yeah. I took it with me. And during the journey, I think a few of the pictures were vaguely exposed. And I made pictures of people I fell in love with. And I came back and those pictures were published, and that was the beginning of the journey I'm still doing
So the first
today.
pictures that you...
Were published when I was 19.
You
from
took
this
it
journey.
in Tibet?
Yeah.
Right.
And they were the same pictures as I do today. Very subjective, very romantic, observations of dignified, enlightened, beautiful, rich, wealthy human beings. And this is 40 years ago. Yeah.
It's in at the beginning of this catalog. There's the phrase that you say. I'm amazed by the transformative power of beauty, which is a great phrase. The beauty.
Yeah, but there may be, and this is to cut an hour-long podcast into 1 minute.
Yes.
I've spent the whole of my adult life, my young and now middle-aged adult life, creating a mirror to redefine myself through the eyes of others.
Wow.
So if you look in all the portraits in the Palazzo Reale, now they are made with 10:8 large, extremely detailed negative. You can in most of the pictures see me in their eyes.
Okay, because...
And it's creating a mirror. The more I invest in the other, the more I crawl under the skin of another human being, whoever they are, wherever they're from, however they speak or however they look like, I become part of them, and I re-see and redefine myself in beauty.
What drives you to go? How do you decide where to go next? Because you've been all over the world, probably.
You're trying to. I've been to a lot of places, and I don't quantify where I've been. You're trying to create a signature as an artist, whereby you can define an interaction with other human beings, and no matter what they look like or where they're from or how they speak or how they dance, you see them in the same way. So people often ask me, "Oh, you must speak a lot of languages." I speak 2 languages,
right?
Nothing else. But
but
there is English and Dutch.
And Dutch.
But there is another language you can speak. That is the human language. And
so how do you interact with all these people?
You interact by emotions, by being extremely vulnerable, by asking for help, by being afraid, by crying, by dancing, by singing, by shaking, by expressing your innermost soul. And your innermost soul is one of see me, protect me, help me. So if you're in the middle of Papua New Guinea and you're surrounded by sort of, to want of a better purpose, cannibals, you're absolutely terrified. So you have to dare to put yourself in a position of vulnerability. 99% of the times, and the 1% tends to be in the developed world here, you'll be looked after. You're not going to be hurt. You're going to be cared for. But first you have to transcend into that vulnerable space. So I'm looking for that interaction. I'm looking for that wealth of human experience. I'm looking to find a language with every culture, and the more remote and the more isolated, the more complex, that understanding of the language is to be held in it, to be honest. Yeah.
Before you were telling me something that, and then we said, oh, let's talk about it later, about the fact that there's a certain point in that trip, that inner trip, and also, you said that you really wanted to die, but you didn't know about it. It was something.
Again, yeah. But again, if you're a child and and we all have our baggage, and this is quite interesting baggage. I didn't like the way I felt. I felt like worms were crawling under my skin, and the way I was educated by these priests was a way of total disrespect for self.
Wow.
And I felt very early on as a child or as a young adult, I so dislike myself, I feel so worthless or inadequate, ugly, it's going to be very difficult to live. And in the very first few years of my career after Tibet as a photographer, I decided to go into areas of violence, areas of pain, areas of suffering, because that took away my suffering. So if I'm coming into your country or your culture and somebody's about to drop something on your head, there's a sense of inevitability of life stopping.
Okay.
And I found that very peaceful. So any minute now a bomb can come on our head, and so you become very present, you become very alive, you disconnect from pain and you empathize with somebody else's pain. So if you're about to die, my pain feels somewhat insignificant compared to your inevitability of death.
Of course.
So I wanted to get very close to it, and the closer you came to somebody else's pain and death, the more it alleviated my pain. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I called myself a war photographer, but I was a fake. I carried a camera and pretended I was interested in somebody else's political, cultural struggle. I had no idea what I was doing other than jumping into the deep end of danger, perhaps with an inevitability of imminent death. Yeah. Again, as a teenager and a young man in my I wasn't conscious of this. It's only now that you can reflect and go, what the fuck was I doing? And okay, I was lying. I called myself a photojournalist. I was not a photojournalist. I was using or maybe abusing the medium of a camera and journalism to put myself in a dangerous situation.
Deliberately. I mean,
totally.
You explore all these civilizations around the world, and one thing it came to my mind is that it appears that in many of these countries, modern age hasn't come. I mean, there's a picture of some indigenous people with modern eyeglasses, for example, but it's like tradition keeps...
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
I think it's important to define what I think I am. It's for others to decide, but I'll express. I'm not a journalist. I'm not an ethnographer. I don't necessarily call myself a photographer, but I use a camera as a medium. I'm an artist. And I'm looking to redefine how we look at each other as human beings. So when I spend a considerable amount of time with these indigenous cultures, I am not making, all pictures are subjective, but I'm specifically making a picture with a message. And the message is how do you want to be seen? How do you want to be respected? How do you want to be regarded? What is the wealth of your identity as a human being, your knowledge, your cultures, your traditions? And how would you define that with me? This is organic conversations you get into. So I can come and photograph you from above with a long lens and show to the developed world how primitive and backward you are crawling through the mud. Or I can get down on my knees, look up at you for a considerable period of time, invest in my observation of you as a very wealthy, knowledgeable human being in a very different way to our wealth and our knowledge. And then we can define what that wealth is. That wealth is culture, that wealth is an alignment, that wealth is a dignity, that wealth is a power. In and around, I create a border. That's why I'm an artist. I create a border of what I want to see and what they want to show. 80% of the people I photograph have a smartphone. Have a smartphone.
Okay.
So when I first started, now when I return as often as I can to many of the cultures I photograph. They're all teaching themselves English. They're following us on Instagram. Maybe some of them will be watching us tonight. The world is changing rapidly.
Okay.
So there are an enormous amounts of elements of modernity there. We choose to keep them deliberately out of the picture because we're trying to create a message. We're trying to create a story. It is romantic. It is subjective. And it is a sort of an odor and a beauty on a wealth of what it is to be human that we're losing very quickly. Yeah.
Why
So
have you chosen photography as a way of exploring?
I didn't choose it. It's by accident. I took an old camera with me when I was a teenager, and then you begin to see. Obviously, I have had as a child an eye. I see things. I'm very spatially aware. I can't add up numbers and I can't write, but I see things spatially. And it became a very practical and sometimes impractical medium to record what I feel. And as the years progress, you mature, you connect the dots, you understand your own human story, and you eventually fall in love with the medium of photography in a very specific way. That's what the exhibition is about, because it enables you to capture all the senses of what you feel when you're in that environment and create a message, create a signature, create a story that you're trying to tell to the world. And that's what the exhibition is about. And the exhibition is we're on a tipping point in modern society of, in my opinion, disconnecting from being human beings. I mean, really healthy human beings with deeply rooted in what it is to be a human being, being vulnerable, being fallible, and entering into a digital world where it will all be created for us. And this is very, very, very dangerous. And what I'm obsessed with is trying to realign ourselves as humans, realize that we have this extraordinary technology and wealth, but that isn't the answer to everything. You need to have one part of your humanity racing into the future, as we all do, which is great, but the other part has to be deeply rooted in the natural world with humanity. And that's what the exhibition. So the exhibition is a mirror, is a screen to create new superheroes for us to wake up and look and act. Yeah.
Well, the title of this book is "Before They Pass Away."
Yeah.
Is because of the civilization.
It's a very melodramatic, somewhat controversial title of nobody's physically passing, but something is passing. Our humanity. Yeah. Big time, yeah. And traveling for the last 56 years, you see the speed that it's changing. And I think predominantly we spend our time worrying about the natural changes in the world. But I think we stop looking at human beings. And they tell the ultimate story.
Now, everybody's a photographer, right? So
5 billion photographers.
5 billion photographers in the world.
Two-thirds of the world's population of photographers.
2/3?
Yeah.
I thought more. I mean,
I know 2/3 have a smartphone.
have a smartphones. Yeah. Okay, so but you very often you use like an old model of view camera.
It's a very important observation. So it's not too. I think it's very exciting that the whole world has become a photographer. What I'm trying to enthuse are all those 5 billion photographers to better connect with what they're taking a picture of and why. I tell a story which I quite like because it illustrates why I use 10x8 analog cameras. And I was explaining to a group of teenagers not so long ago who asked me the same question. And this one teenager said, yeah, you talk about carrying heavy tripods and on your own with this one picture that
in
may
the
not
jungle
work.
or something.
Why
Yes.
bother?
Yeah.
Are you so old you don't understand how easy life has become?
Right.
And I said, that's a very direct question. And he sprays this, he goes like this, and he says, with one of these, I press my finger and I go, I make 1,000 pictures in 1 second. They go straight up in the sky. They're amazing. And why do you travel around the world with an old analog camera?
Right.
And there are no guarantees. And you can't see what you're doing. You can't see what
Also
you're making.
because of the temperature.
No, because it's on analog. It's on a cassette, and you can't see, and you have to wait.
Right.
Why?
Yes.
And I understood very early in the conversation, if I carried on talking about photography, he would even fall deeper asleep than he already was with the rest of the teenagers. So I flipped it and I asked him, I said, you can be direct to me, calling me very old. I'm going to ask you what you want to feel. You're 16 years old, you're in the prime of your life, everything is beginning, you're on fire. What's the most important thing you feel tomorrow? And first of all, he sort of says, I don't need to feel anything. And I said, well, bullshit. Tell me what you want to feel. And his friend started whispering into his ears. And he starts getting a bit shy and says, yeah, but you wouldn't understand anything about that. And I said, well, try. And he says, yeah, okay, well, there's a girl I want to kiss. So I said, oh, okay, it's interesting. There's a girl I want to kiss. Can we use that as a metaphor? Can we talk about two different kinds of kisses? So he goes, oh, yeah, good idea. So all the teenagers start to listen. And I said, the first kiss is your kiss, yeah? It's the spray and pray kiss. It's really easy, and it's guaranteed, and it's not one kiss, it's 1,000 kisses tomorrow. You go to school, you can kiss 1,000 people all day, nobody says no, you don't have to pay anybody, you don't have to choose them on an app, it just happens all day, and everybody loves you. That's option one.
Option one.
So he immediately goes, yeah, that's the kiss I want. Okay, there is another kiss, but this is a complicated kiss because it's only one kiss, and I can't guarantee it. It may not happen. But let's say it does happen. That kiss lasts for 3 seconds. You can't use your tongue, you can't use your hands, and you have to kiss on the cheek. And it's the last 3 seconds of the last minute, of the last hour, of the last day, of the last week, after 3 months waiting. Which kiss do you choose? And he goes, you really are stupid, huh? I spray and pray.
The 1,000.
Yeah, the 1,000 kisses. Okay, yes. Spray and pray, right. Spray and you? And I said, well, option 2. Why? Because it's not about the kiss. It's about the process. It's about the journey. It's about the suffering. It's about the search. It's about the rejection. It's about the touch. It's about the aspiration. And then it's the transcendence into, I perhaps don't want a kiss. I don't want to make the perfect picture, because the day I make the perfect picture, the journey's over. So I want to spend the rest of my life, another 50 years, you call me old, watch me, another 50 years searching for that image that transcends a picture that's ever been made. There's that one picture that hangs on a wall that is so rich, so deep, so wealthy of investment, of aesthetic, of passion, of pain, that makes everybody cry. That one Mona Lisa, that one image, and I will spend the rest of my life searching for it. Now, the thrill is, I will never get it, but every single breathing moment, I will apply to it. And maybe that's one more day, and I get knocked over by a bus tomorrow, or it is another 50 years. So it's the process, that's the thrill. So yes, you can make 1,000 pictures tomorrow by the click of a finger, and they all go into the sky, but you feel nothing. The further I go on this journey, the more I invest, the deeper I go, the more complicated I make the process, the more layers I want to include in that one picture. Whether you or anybody else sees it, doesn't matter. It's the investment that you make. And the closer you come to other human beings, and the closer you come to being loved, because you invest everything at the foot of the other to see them. So some of these pictures are very complicated. They take months to make. And in that process, these people don't let me go. You belong in our tribe. We are not letting you go because you've seen us like nobody's ever seen us before. That's what I'm looking for. It's being held and being one.
It's this story is reminds me of some parallels, of course, with my world, which is music. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind is like using vinyl or using, a USB key to play music, which is, it's easy. You can have all the music you want in.
I use the analogy, we were talking about it earlier. You can sit at home and put a memory stick in and press a button, or you can be a conductor standing in front of it. You've got one night and one night only to link 1,000 violins and a choir of 100, and they've all got to align to make that one sound that goes deep, deep. It's excruciatingly complicated, but that one aspiration, that's art.
Yeah.
It's the same song.
Yeah.
And one is done by,
And another is concerts. I mean, you can see whatever you want on your computer, on your phone, but
Not
go,
only can you-
go into a concert is it was when I was a young guy was an adventure that that starts from when you go out of your house and then you meet friends and then you travel. You don't know where to sleep. You don't know if you will eat. You don't know if you will come back.
Make
but
love,
you,
whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but you go to a show and at the end the concert is there. Is what is the.
Yeah, so when I
everything.
left when I was 17 and I disappeared to Tibet,
Yes.
I'd seen Tintin in Tibet. I didn't know anything else. So now when I still go on journeys and I go on a lot of, I'm in the middle of a project with them, I still don't know what's going to happen. I do very little research. I go, I'm going this way.
So what's your next?
Because I'm in the middle, it's coincidental on a project of the Middle East at the moment.
Oh, right. Well.
So and it's good timing, but also bad timing. But I say good timing. If ever there was a time the world has to re-understand some of the richest cultures on the planet, for the last 30 or 40 years, we've closed our eyes. And
Have you ever been there already, Middle East?
many of the countries, and I'm returning to them now.
Yeah.
So that, and then you can go beforehand. You can go online and plan and worry and check, or you can just follow your heart and see where it takes you.
And how long do you travel? Like in 1 year? What's your schedule of a typical year?
Before the pandemic, I was still very anxious. I still had a lot of shit to resolve, and I was running a lot, metaphorically. So I spent
running
running
away.
away.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I spent far too much time traveling. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we were forced to stop. As a result of that, I had time to reflect, and I realized that a lot of the shit had already been solved, but I hadn't dared look at it or feel it. I made a beautiful project in the Netherlands, which I really enjoyed. And then since then, I'm traveling
So
again.
exploring the culture of the Netherlands?
In the Netherlands,
All
yeah.
right.
And falling in love for the first time in my life. But that wasn't in the Netherlands, that was in Kenya. And then now I'm traveling, but 50% of the time. So in balance. And I think that is also a nice metaphor for it. It's not that if you go to the Marquesa Islands or go to southern Sudan, northern Kenya, that's a definitive state of being, but it's part of being. So I try to spend 50% of my time in this world. This is where my culture is. This is, and 50% of the time in the
50%.
developing world, discovering and trying to realign that balance. Yeah.
After this, let's say, adventurous youth, did you have the chance to make a family, fall in love, have kids, or...
How deep do we want to go?
Oh, very deep.
Okay, I have to be careful here.
Because we're live.
I'm married when I was 23. I met an amazing woman who gave me two options. One, to carry on as a war photographer and die very quickly. Right. Or two, to move to the Netherlands and start a family. And she said,
do what you...
You said, do what you want. She
Either
said,
of
you
the
will
two.
never get a better offer than this.
Okay.
It's a sort of one life only offer. So at the age of 24, I moved to the Netherlands, got married, and had 3 extraordinary children. But very early on in that relationship, I realized that my now ex-wife had probably experienced what I'd experienced as a child. And we were trying to fix each other, which is not healthy. So if you don't like yourself as a human being, you're never going to be able to love. If you don't love yourself, it's impossible to love somebody else in a healthy way. And I think neither of us loved ourselves. And as a result, we were trying to fix each other, but it's like the wrong sides of a magnet. So we held on for as long as was humanly possible, and then we woke up one day and went...
And that one day was after how many years?
I knew it after only 3 years, but I hung around for 20 years.
For 20.
Because we had 3 children.
Yeah.
And then one day we both woke up and looked in the mirror and said, okay, first we have to fix this shit. You have to look in the mirror and fall in love with yourself, and only if you manage to do that, are you valid or worthwhile in going to love and receive love from the other. And if I'm honest, that happened for me the first time only 3 years ago. So it took me 53 years to meet another human being and say, I have something valid to give to you, and I can ask from something valid.
And this happened in Nigeria?
No, in Kenya.
Kenya, excuse me, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's a long story cut short, but yeah, there's obviously many more layers to it. But, And there are 3 extraordinary children, and she's an extraordinary ex-wife, but she leads her life and I lead my life. Yeah.
So what the exhibition goes here in Palazzo Reale in Milan until April?
No. If it goes to plan, end of February.
February, okay.
And then it is produced by an extraordinary Milanese publisher, Schira.
Yes.
And our mutual intention is that it travels through Italy. The Palazzo Reale exhibition is my first major museum exhibition. I'm very proud of it, and the intention is that it spends a number of years traveling through Italy.
Through Italy, okay.
But I am quite new to Italy, in the Italian culture. I think in Holland a few people know what I do. So it will take a while for it to gain momentum, for people to have a better idea of... but it's thrilling. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite photographer? Or
hundreds. We're sitting in the studio of one of them.
Yeah, of course.
Many. Let's talk about, there are hundreds, but I'll narrow it down to 3. Yeah. They're very specific. They all use 10x8 cameras. All 3 of them are dead. They didn't die this way, but they're passed. One of them is Edward Sheriff Curtis. He's an extraordinary man. In the beginning of the last century, he spent 30 years photographing the Native American Indian.
Okay.
Very famous pictures. When he died, he was told, everything you've done for the last 30 years is valueless because you photographed primitive cultures. We are Americans and we're progressing into the future. And 85 to 90% of his work was destroyed because they said this is primitive. In the 1970s, a few of his negatives were found, and they subsequently became the only defining document of an extraordinary heritage of a nation. I mean, with all honesty, if you look at North American culture today, which, well, let's not go there. So that's Edward Sheriff Curtis. The other one is also an American photographer, Ansel Adams. He used a 10x8 camera to photograph the natural world. And because of his pictures, he helped create the first national parks in America. And his argument was also, if we keep developing in this way, there won't be any nature left. So his love of the natural world managed to preserve some of it. And the last one is Richard Avedon. Yeah. He loved humanity. Yeah, and definitely. He saw in everybody a beauty, and he was the most extraordinary fashion photographer, but at the same time he photographed what he's most celebrated for was his human beings, in all their pain, in all their suffering, in all their celebration. And he also did that on a 10x8 camera in their most extraordinary detail. So those are 3 of hundreds. Yeah.
Before you told me that you just went to 1 concert in your life, but it was Live Aid. So
Yeah. It was.
It's like you went to like 25 concerts in one day.
It was the summer. Shows how old I am. It was the summer I ran away, and I was standing in the back, and that summer I disappeared. And it was essentially the first and the last concert I went to. Yeah, an extraordinary concert to go to, and then I disappeared that summer to Tibet, and I spent the whole of my youth sort of in strange and wonderful.
So it was before going to Tibet.
Yeah. And and as I said earlier, I sort of gained an extraordinary amount of knowledge, and then now I'm trying to play catch up. So I'm occasionally going to concerts.
It's strange because this kind of, if you have an experience, how you were 16 years old?
17.
17.
Yeah.
So if, as a 17 years old from
17.
England,
Yeah.
you go to you participate in an event like Live Aid with all the biggest stars in the world.
I found it terrifying.
You didn't like it?
No, but I was already terrified of myself.
Okay.
I was terrified of the world, and this was the tipping point. I'm not saying I ran away because of Live Aid. We just started talking about music earlier, but I found it terrifying. I felt very inadequate. I felt very insignificant. I felt very out of control.
Right.
And this was the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning. But I'd already planned to run away after this. And
When you talk about running away, you often say disappear, because if like
I wanted to disappear. Yeah, I didn't want to. I didn't look at myself in a mirror for 20 years. So in a
But
metaphoric way, I wanted to disappear.
Probably your father knew from his credit card where you were
I didn't use it. You can't use credit cards in Tibet. Yeah.
No, but to buy the airplane ticket.
No,
where to go.
yeah. He knew I was in China somewhere.
Okay, somewhere.
I don't know whether he cared actually, but that's a whole other story. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Look after yourself. Yeah, but go into the world and sort of grow a thick skin and survive. And I think he lived for 10 years in the Antarctic, so he thought, well,
Yeah.
he'll come back one day looking like a yeti covered in hair or not. Yeah.
It's been a great conversation. I don't know if you have questions for Jimmy from the audience who's here at the moment. Yes?
Well, I see that you sometimes came back to the population, you take photos and you show your book. So I'm interested about the reaction of that.
This is
Let me just
it's a
tell
really
it
good
again,
question. Yeah.
The question is, have you ever, or you did come back to places where you did photographs
A lot.
and
A lot.
showed your
Yeah.
work to the...
Yeah,
to the
it's a really, really good question. And there are two parts of it. Because when you're making the picture, it's analog. So you're not sitting on a computer, retouching, editing, deleting. It's in the camera, in a cassette, and then it's gone until you come back. First of all, everybody asks me to return. What's going on in this box? Two things. When you come back, the first reaction is, you're back. You said you'd come back.
Okay.
Then often when you show the book, they're not very interested. And then the general conclusion is that we're not busy with the way we look. You're obviously busy with the way you look, but we know we're more busy with how we feel, if that makes sense. And they spend a lot of time by far, an enormous amount of time, grooming each other and telling each other and touching each other and combing each other and painting each other. So it's a communal experience of adoration. Here we have a sort of disconnected selfie experience of adoration. So they sort of look off 50% of the time. They put the book on the fire to keep warm when it gets cold at night. No, but it's not about the book. But then the book goes on the fire and we warm our hands and then they give me another cuddle and said, you came back.
So maybe it's best important that you came back, not the book.
Yeah, it's this, you're our friend. And sometimes it takes me 8 years or 9 years to come back. But you came back. It's about that intimacy of human contact, not the and then they look and they say, well, okay, if this is the way you see us. But they're not busy with mirrors. But the irony is, and if you take it into the personal journey, we're busy with what we look like. We're busy, we tell each other, we let society, I wanted to disconnect, I wanted to discover an inner Jimmy, a beauty inside that I could not see on the outside or feel. Yeah? By spending more and more time with, that's what they're doing. It's about an internal feeling. And then as 1 year, 2 year, 10 year, 20 year, 40 years passes, you begin to dare to feel a beauty, but it's an internal beauty. And that's mirrored by the experiences you have with, and that's a beauty of humanity, of physicality, of interactivity, of vulnerability, of as little ego as possible, of spending the whole time asking for help, the older I become, the more knowledge I realize I don't have, the more vulnerable you dare to be when you go on into communities. And the more richer you become, it's a sort of inside-out experience, yeah, if that makes sense. So you get richer and richer and richer. The more time you spend with, the older the people, they're regarded as the most beautiful. They count the lines on the faces. The more lines you have, the richer you are. They're like contours of a map. The more lines you have, the higher, the more wealthy, the more wisdom. It's the opposite of our society. Yeah. Our society is...
Yeah, you don't want to grow old. Yeah.
It's not about growing old. It's about exterior aesthetic. Here it's about an interior wealth. And it's a completely different... so having come from a disconnected youth, I had to find a way, and I'm still busy with it, how can I feel a beauty that will never be seen, but it has to be felt inside. Yeah.
So what's your relation with your own body now, as opposed to when
Beautifully complicated, but beautifully complicated. But it's okay. Do you all know the film Forrest Gump?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to use a metaphor again about how I feel about my body. When the film Forrest Gump, you know the story. A little boy, his mother says, "You're always going to be a child." But the advantage of always being a child is you'll see life very differently. And you have to look at yourself like you're a feather. And this is the beginning of the film, the feather. And she says, we're all feathers. And when we're children, we see how precious and beautiful and vulnerable and beautiful that feather is. And we care for it, and we stroke it, and we trust it, and we believe in it, and we let it fly. And if you follow it, and it'll take you to your lightness of being, and that's sometimes your happiness. When you leave childhood, and by meeting a pile of priests or life or whatever, we remain that feather, but we let it fall and we don't care for it. And then when you don't care for it, it will not catch that lightness of being and you won't fly. I think to answer your question now, I picked up my feather and very consciously, very vulnerably, very patiently, one day, one hair at a time, every morning I wake up and I straighten one hair. And tomorrow I straighten 2 hairs. 1 year I have 365 hairs. Yeah. But there are tens of thousands of hairs on the feather. And slowly my feather is flying. Yeah. So I am an adult with scars, as everybody is, but I'm also daring to get back in touch with that child. The child Forrest Gump was. When Forrest was 7, he met Jenny. They fell in love. Yeah. 2 little children. And it was only Jenny entered the adult world. She wasn't a child anymore. She let her feather fall and let it break. It was only when she was dying, she said, I met the love of my life, Forrest, when we were 7, but it's now too late. Before I die, I'm daring to pick up that feather and care for it. And in a strange way, I trust that it will catch the lightness of being that I'm now following, and it'll give me another 50 years, metaphorically.
Another 50 years is okay.
I won't live another 50 years, but when I wake up in the morning, that's my aspiration. As opposed to saying I'm dying and life is over and I don't give a fuck about the world. I go into the world every day seeing the light and seeing the beauty and seeing the possibility from the eyes of a child. But at the same time, with thousands of lines of eccentric wisdom. So the two together. So that's the relationship with my body. It's very awkward, but I try to care for it, and I try to love it, and I try to see it, and I try to feel it in all its awkwardness. And it hurts, but I connect with it. And strangely, the more you do that, the more invested you are, the more care you put in, and the more longevity you aspire to have to carry on the journey to make that kiss.
For the kiss. Because
whether the outside world understands it or whether you go to the exhibition, you see that beauty, I don't know, but I feel it. And I want to sustain it and get closer and closer and closer so that one day I'm held and loved without being hurt. And I want to make that a mirror for all of us. So I think if you look at the news today, when people don't like each other themselves, they want to hurt the other. And at the moment, that is happening in a part of the world in a way that is beyond humanly comprehensible. But it does not have anything to do with the religion. It does not have anything to do with the land. It has to do with pain. Pain, 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 pain. And when you deeply feel it on the other, you impose it on the other. And at the moment, it's been manipulated by world powers and politics. But deep down inside, it's people in pain. That's all. And if you can't solve that personal pain, then you're only going to oppose pain on the other people in extraordinary repercussions, which is happening at the moment. So when I was 7 years old, I wanted a Kalashnikov and I wanted to shoot somebody. So when I meet a child in Africa with red eyes, standing there with a gun, wanting to shoot me, I empathize with him. He doesn't want to shoot me, he's in pain, he's afraid. So you have to submit and go, I see your pain. I empathize with your pain.
And that happened.
It's happened on numerous occasions. And then you transcend and you find a different way of communicating. Because it's about empathy. So when people say, oh, you spend a lot of time here, you must speak many languages. I speak no languages but the pictures are all the same. Because if you dare strip yourself of all your skin, and you make yourself as vulnerable as possible, and you put yourself as a human being and say, help me, help me.
Yeah.
99.9999% of the time, you'll be picked up and cared for. And the more in touch people are with their culture and with the natural world, the more rich they are and the more caring they are to does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it has nothing to do with
actually,
photography.
Empathy is what really the first thing that comes
But
out
that's
of
all.
your work. You know,
But by
you feel-
accident,
you can
I
feel.
went on that journey because of experiences in childhood.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful if you dare investigate it. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Jimmy. It's been such a pleasure to have
Thank
this
you for
conversation
listening.
with you. It's been very good.
Thanks for being.
Humanity. Oddio, sì, non lo so. Forse voleva fare una domanda ancora, non so.
Sorry, I wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
So,
I'm not
yeah,
getting. Yeah.
we're not in a...
Sorry, hi.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you, did you ever feel, or what do you do if you feel sometimes like what you do maybe it's not worth it, or I mean, have you ever lost your confidence? And what do you do?
One of the most important questions. Have I lost my confidence? Continually. When I was 16, 40 years ago, 40 years ago, it was difficult then to have a profession as a photographer. Today, I don't think a profession as a photographer exists. I've lost count of the nights I would wake up in the middle of the night and my bed would be wet. Not from urine, but from bodily sweat. Absolute fear. Oh my, this is not possible. I'm insane. Get a life. Now, the advantage of having no qualifications, I have a fake driving license as well, so I have no official paperwork since I'm 17, is that the longer you hold on, the more you have no choice.
You have a fake driving license?
Yeah, but I had an analog, and then I moved to the Netherlands, and I said, can you make it a Dutch driving license? And they made it digital, and they didn't check.
Okay.
But there were no computers then, so it's lucky.
So
But
okay.
I said, no, but it's okay.
But do you
it's not-
drive?
Yeah,
Okay.
not very well, but... so the longer you hold on, the more down a cul-de-sac you become. So I still wake up today and go, oh, and I wake up and the bed is wet, and I go, you're mad, and this is insane, and it is not possible. But you've been done 40 years with no paperwork, and nobody's going to give you a job. You have nothing on LinkedIn, you know what I mean? So you have no choice anymore. So when my kids are in their 20s, mid-late 20s, and they want everything to happen yesterday. They want 1,000 kisses last night. And they're very impatient when they don't get them. And I'm saying, and when they don't get those 1,000 kisses yesterday, I can't, I'm not an artist, I can't do it. Everybody feels that. Everybody. It's human. And in a beautiful way, the more fear you have, the more alive you become. And when you go through that fear, the stronger you become when you come out of the other side. And those who give up, they should be working with a medium or an artistry or... but you have to be fear, you have to be terrified. You have to be. But you also have to wake up and realize there is nothing, I cannot, it sounds a bit melodramatic. If I can't see the world this way, and if I can't disappear searching for that kiss, it's very difficult to find, I mean, of course there are people that I love and that love me, but that's my whole existence. Total obsession. Hence the artistry of it. You know, and we were talking earlier about music. Yes, a computer can drive, but if you, and you have to be terrified. There are 5 billion other people wanting to take pictures of them. Everybody can paint, everybody can sing, everybody can dance. Yeah, I don't think there's one day I don't wake up in the morning questioning, going, oh, Jimmy, you know. And then you wake up and then you say, okay, but every now and again I felt that feather flying, that happiness, and fuck, that was an amazing feeling. You know, and you get to a picture like this, and this is not my favorite picture, but it's a picture which illustrates that feeling of flying.
1,000 pages, but he will find the one that he wants.
Yeah. And you know, and this is one of those moments when there are 1,000 feathers. And to make this picture is excruciatingly complicated. And I could spend all night telling you how. But the moment after this, we fell asleep here. We could not walk through it was 2 days walk back to the village. I was very tired. They said, we're staying here. There's no bed, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no internet, there's no nothing. I was so tired, I collapsed here.
On the rocks.
On the rocks.
Stones. Yes.
They sat around me, they lit a fire, and I woke up in the morning, and you know, there was mist, and they gave me breakfast with live worms, and I felt very different, because it was one of the best nights' sleep I've ever had, because I was so invested, I was so empty, obsessively looking for this one picture, that I couldn't have been more vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, I woke up protected. I felt safe. And I remember waking up in the morning in an embryo position, and they were sitting around me going like this. And those are moments of happiness and of total sanctuary, where you feel almost going back to if you want to go really heavy, going back to the womb. And I wake up and I just see cannibals lying around me, stroking me, smiling at me, going, Jimmy, 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 Jimmy. And then you sob with understanding. And I have to have those experiences. I have to have them. And they're few and far between. They're the moments when the feather it really catches that wind. And to sustain that, I have nightmares, and how can I to facilitate getting into that position? Because that position is so finite, it's so rich, it's again, this is getting super heavy, it's rebirth. And when you have those on consecutive periods, the power that it gives you, and the hope and the belief and the love and the celebration of life and what it is to be a human, another human. Does that make sense? It's very melodramatic. So becoming from a place of deep connection in childhood to total disconnection. Really, in this struggle, this 40-year struggle to, wow, this is amazing. What a privilege it is to be a human being. And I have to sustain that. So I'm terrified, because it's what it is to be human. So yeah. Unending doubts, unending fear, but I push and I push and I push and I push, because I have to get back into that place of pure and utter, unadulterated beauty of being a human being. And when you invest so far with people like that, they don't let you go, and you feel one. You feel totally one, and in love with yourself and with one another and the world that we live in. And it's an incredible experience. It's like taking I've never taken narcotics, but it's like taking 1,001. It's that lifelong journey for a high. And I think a lot of us, a total obsession, but it's thrilling. So I'm terrified that I can't experience it again. And if I'd been taking a shortcut the whole of my life, I could have been popping a few pills or around the corners. But I want to take the long journey. I want to take the invested journey. I want to know how I get under that waterfall. I want to know how I get to that place. By a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and pure and utter, unadulterated investing in the process. Yeah. And when it happens, it's... Yeah.
Grazie mille.
Does that
Thank you, Jimmy.
Yeah. But it's not the picture. It's not the picture. Yeah.
Per me può andare avanti anche 8 ore, non c'è problema.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot. Have a good night.